This is the Bambu X2D, and it is a strange printer. The Bambu X2D looks like a two printhead version of the P2S, and I guess technically it is, but you don't use it like you think that you might. And in this video, I'm going to explain exactly who should and should not buy this printer, and why. If you don't have a specific use case for it, something like this, which I'll explain in a minute, it's going to be a waste of your money. So that's because it looks like it's a two printhead version of the P2S, and technically I guess it is, but you don't use it like you might think that you do. I've talked to a few people who bought the Bambu H2D over the last year, and more than one of them said the same thing to me. They wish that they had waited. Not because the H2D is a bad printer, it is a terrific printer, but because the X2D arrived at just under half of the price of the H2D, and it does a lot of the things that those people were buying the H2D for. The Multicolorment Multifilament Award at Bambu goes to the H series. And that's because the right nozzle on this printer is not as capable as the one on the left. It's primarily good for support material and for having an exotic filament on one side and a more traditional one on the other side. Combine that with its heated chamber and a gear system that handles a lot of filament types, and the X2D is a specific tool for a specific job, but it's a bad solution for people who want something like a P2S but with two nozzles to do more colors. The X2D's primary job is to have one filament on the left nozzle and something like a support material on the right nozzle. Or again, an exotic material on one nozzle and a standard material on the other. The problem with using the P2S and the X1C for something like this is that all of the materials share the same nozzle. So in a single head system like the X1C or the P2S, switching to support material means that the AMS has to retract the current filament, feed in the new filament, extrude the old material out of the print head, prime the nozzle, print, and the whole cycle has to start again when you want to switch over to the support materials. So even if you're just doing a one color PLA and a one PETG print, you still have to cycle the whole thing every single time on a layer that it switches from one to the other. That cycle wastes filament, and in the time it takes for the print material to cool between the switches, sometimes the supports don't even touch it properly, and that makes the scaffolding fail. Before I break down the specs for you, let's talk for a second about who should buy this printer. I ran an Etsy store for years, and this would have been the perfect printer for me. For my Etsy storefront, I was printing a lot of cosplay pieces like helmets and blasters and lightsabers, and a lot of spaceship and tabletop gaming stuff too. Usually the supports work just fine, and then sometimes the supports, even on a print that I had done lots of times, would just fuse to the material. The solution is to print supports that don't fuse into your material using a different filament type. So if you're printing PLA, you can use PETG for the supports, and if you're printing PETG, you can use PLA, because those two materials don't bond well. So when you pull the supports off of these, they come off clean. So I'm going to show you that with this. This model was printed with PLA for the body and PETG for the support. I'm just going to quickly show you that all you have to do is pull lightly on the filament, and it all just pops right off. And just like that, the supports are off. I would have to spend 5 or 6 minutes sometimes with the clippers trying to get these off cleanly. Right now, it happens to be a perfect printer for somebody looking for a P2S as well, and that is because of the price. Right now, as of print time, the X2D is $899. The P2S is $799. Meanwhile, the H2D is $1,700. But if you can afford the P2S and you can stretch the budget about $100 more, the X2D is a much better printer for you. Here's the things that set this printer apart from the P2S. The chamber heats up to 65 degrees Celsius. It's not passive like the P1S, which just traps heat from the hot end and hopes for the best. This machine warms the enclosure with a heater. Because of the internal 65-degree temperatures, it can print ABS, ASA, nylon, and filaments that have carbon fiber in them. One of the differences between the X2D and the H2D is that the left nozzle maxes out at 300 degrees Celsius, while the H2D does about 350. The speed on the left nozzle is 1,000 millimeters per second with an acceleration of 20,000 millimeters per second squared. To put that in the other way, it goes zoom. Build volume on the left nozzle is about 256 by 256 by 260. But when you're running with both nozzles, you're at about 235 by 256 by 256, and that's because the right nozzle can't get all the way over to the left when the printhead is all the way left, so you lose a couple of millimeters that way. That right nozzle is Bowden fed. The extruder motor sits on the rear of the printer, not on the tool head, and that's how Bambu kept the tool head light enough for the speed going back and forth for the left side. The Bowden setup doesn't control filament quite as precisely as the direct drive left nozzle, so print quality on the right side is theoretically slightly lower, but I've never seen anything come out of it yet that looks bad. And for support material, that doesn't matter at all. You're not trying to make the supports look good. And then if you're printing exotic filaments on that right side, it doesn't really matter how fast it's going because most of those exotic filaments want to print pretty slowly. Inside the printer is a live view camera, and there's a second camera right at the nozzle that the P2S does not have. That one is doing AI monitoring that watches the print surface as you're printing. Making spaghetti with this is extremely unlikely. Bambu says that it's quiet enough to use in your living room, although I don't really know about that. I can hear you say, yeah, but this thing releases all kinds of chemicals, and it does. That is another reason not to sleep next to it, but there is a 3-stage filtration system in this, a G3 pre-filter, H12 HEPA filter, and an activated carbon filter. However, if you leave the door or the top open, none of those filters are going to help you. About the big price on the H2D is the big print bed. A lot of the people who bought the H2D for the functionality didn't really need the extra build volume. Now, if you're printing like a cosplay helmet in one shot, the bigger bed is much better. But if you didn't need the bed size to be that large and you didn't want to do laser engraving, the H2D was really a lot of money for features that they might not have needed. Let me know in the comments below about what you were comparing this to and what is making you think about the X2D instead of one of the other printers from Bambu or anywhere else on the market. For Dave Choices, I'm David Schloss, and as always, thanks so much for giving this a try.